Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you do well, and today we've got the Tuesday box office number for Spider-Man No Way Home, and it yet continues to show itself as a true powerhouse, doing better than Avengers Infinity War and very much keeping up with its domestic total at the same point of its release. So could we see this film match the massive domestic opening, or rather massive domestic total that Avengers Infinity War had, and could we even see it perform pretty well in the international box office? We'll have to, of course, wait for those numbers to be released, but all I can say is that this film, because of the domestic alone, is on pace to probably get to $750 million before the weekend, which means that this film is probably going to make well over 800 to 900 million, or be at well over 8 to 900 million by the end of this coming weekend internationally, and that is a huge feat, not just for a Spider-Man film, but and not just for a film during a pandemic era, but also just for a film in general, right? There's a reason why this movie is setting records and why this is such an important film, destroying the pandemic narrative that has been shoved down our throats, especially by the shills in the box office media. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure you're subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So I'm playing stay-at-home dad today, as daycare is closed for the holidays, and so baby Thor just went down for his nap, so I am sorry for the later than usual video, but I'm glad that I was able to hold off because we now have the Tuesday numbers, and it's showing once again Spider-Man No Way Home is just destroying everything in its path. $31.4 million. It's only about a 15% drop from its Monday showing, which puts its entire domestic total at this point at $328.6 million. Again, still easily decimating all of the MCU films to come out this year, and the vast majority of any other major domestic release to come out this year as well. What's most impressive, though, about this movie is how this film is comparing not just to the MCU films that came out this year, but also to films that came out pre-pandemic that are known as some of the biggest box offices of all time. So specifically, we look at comparing this to Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War as far as, again, pre-pandemic times. And that's what's interesting, is that during almost any other box office breakdown that I've done, I've had countless people in the comment section, and I've read countless articles saying it's not fair to compare the movies to movies that came out before the pandemic. That's just not fair. That's just not right. Or when West Side Story came out and the box office was terrible, the number one excuse then was it's Omicron. And then all of a sudden now, where are the excuses? Now it's, well, I mean, of course this film was going to make money. I mean, this film was always going to make money. It's amazing. It truly is amazing to see how the narrative continues to change and how the excuses continue to change as well. Everyone was always saying, the only example you have is Venom 2 doing 10 million more than the original Venom, which, hey, guess what? Is still a fact. It still performed better in its opening weekend. Yes, and I totally admit that the original Venom film still did better internationally because there are a lot crazier lockdowns going on internationally. There's some bad stuff happening here in the States, but there's a lot crazier stuff going on up in Canada and a lot crazier stuff going on over in other parts of the world, especially in places like Austria and Germany and Australia, where, again, violations of human rights are happening seemingly on a daily basis, and things are getting worse. And hopefully people start to stand up for their rights, including here in the States. But what we can see from all of this, though, is that even with that being the case, this film seems to be the exception. We also have other films like No Time to Die, which actually did pretty well in the international market, making north of $600 million in the international market. So again, it seems that the pandemic excuse only works in certain cases, but then there's these exceptions that come out. And maybe it is that there are some movies that people are actually willing to go out to go see. Maybe it is that in this case, Spider-Man No Way Home is a movie that people across the world are willing to go out and see. For instance, in No Time to Die's case, people domestically really didn't want to go see the movie. That's why its domestic number is pretty low in comparison to some of the other bigger films to come out this year, whereas internationally it was a pretty huge hit. Spider-Man No Way Home is showing that, hey, people want to see this film, whether it is here domestically or whether it is in the international market, regardless of what's going on as far as the scaredemic, as far as the fear-mongering is concerned, because, again, people realize, oh, I can live my life, and I remember what it's like to be able to just enjoy myself, right? We've been seeing this happen for the better part of a year now at this point, with many sporting events coming back into place, having various both inside and outside events going on, and concerts and all these other things. And so people are starting to realize, wait a minute, I remember loving these things, and I remember why I love these things. And it looks like we finally now also have something here with the movie industry as well. And hopefully it's a sign that people are going to say, yeah, we're just not going to take it anymore. Screw all of this nonsense. But as you can see in this comparison, $31.4 million puts it below Avengers Endgame's Tuesday number, but puts it well above that of Infinity War. And these numbers have been adjusted for inflation. At the same time of their release, we had Avengers Infinity War at $307 million, whereas No Way Home was at $328. But wait a minute, I'm comparing films that are not during the pandemic. How is that fair? You're right. You know what? Let's go ahead and compare this to other pandemic-era films. Oh, wait a minute. Shang-Chi was at $101 million. So this has over $200 million more. Oh, Black Widow was not even at $100 million. Oh, well, Oh, Eternals was only at $80 million. Huh. Interesting. Oh, by the way, this 328, I wonder how this compares to the end results of all of the MCU films this year. Oh, wait a minute. Shang-Chi had 224. Black Widow had 183. Eternals had 163. Huh. Wait a minute. But is it that I have to compare this to pre-pandemic films, or do I have to compare this to pandemic films? Again, the narrative falls apart. The narrative does not work, because in the end, this is a film that people actually wanted to see. This is a film that catered to fans. This is a film that marketed itself towards fans and was able to play the rumor game just right to be able to not just create a hype, but then deliver on the hype as well. Whereas we've seen in a lot of other MCU, a lot of other Disney projects especially, and now more recently with HBO Max / Warner Brothers release of The Matrix 4, which I'm halfway through, and dear Lord, it's atrocity. I'm going to do a review on the channel at some point, either today or tomorrow, I imagine, when I finish it. But man, oh man, talking about, retconning everything, trying to push agendas, it's insane. But because of that, that's the reason why films like that have been complete and utter failures. People don't want to see that. People don't want things that they are fans of. People don't want things that they have fond memories of to be destroyed or to be pushed into a narrative, right? No Way Home instead just gives you a film that you can sit back and enjoy and have fun with. Keep in mind that Spider-Man No Way Home's Monday was better than even that of Endgame when adjusted for inflation. So this is a movie that is expected to be a domestic juggernaut. If this trend continues, if it continues to kind of go blow for blow with a film like Infinity War, we could expect the film to get somewhere domestically in the $600 million range. You add on top of that it's doing well internationally as well, even in the midst of crazy lockdowns, even in the midst of the crazy human rights violations going on across the world. And we could expect this film to still get 600 plus million at least internationally. And obviously, we'll have some updated numbers as the week goes on, probably by the end of the weekend as well. So this is a movie that is very much on pace to make $1 billion. And there's even speculation that this film could even reach upwards of $2 billion now. That's something that's now being talked about. And when you compare, again, the domestic number to what Infinity War did, and then you take into account that it's doing better than Infinity War, and that when you compare this internationally, that in like-for-like markets, it's pacing ahead of a lot of other films, including films even within the Spider-Man Tom Holland franchise, you start to realize that, yeah, this film might be the real deal. This film might be able to actually make $1 billion overseas before you even add in the domestic money, which could put this film north of $1.5 billion. Now, again, we'll have to wait for that second weekend. I always wait for the second weekend drop off before I make any of my projections. And this is definitely a special animal, for sure, especially with the time of the year that's coming out in, and also really the event film that it's become, not just as a movie, not just as pop culture entertainment, but also I would say as far as the broader culture is concerned, right? As kind of a giant middle finger to all of the crazy nonsense being pushed and perpetuated by the media types and by the tyrants who are in various government roles. But again, comparing this film overall to any film coming out from the MCU this year, it's no comparison. And what this shows us is that the MCU, specifically Disney and their distribution, has not been able to entice fans, has not been able to provide anything that people have actually been wanting to see. And if you think next year is going to be any different, just look at the films that are on their slate. There really aren't any MCU films that anyone could honestly, if they're looking at it, say, oh yeah, we really want that one. I mean, maybe you can make an argument for Black Panther 2, but even that one's got a lot of issues going on behind the scenes, which could lead to it not not being nearly as successful as the first film. And of course, if things are still going the way they are, pandemic will be used as an excuse, and they'll try and make people forget about the fact that this film is destroying all of those narratives. But we know the facts. We know the numbers, and numbers do not lie. Again, I've been covering this on my website, ombreviews.com. On the front page, the current box office battle, Spider-Man No Way Home against every MCU film. Well, worldwide box office, hey, it now looks like it will probably be able to, on its own, and in fact, probably not even close to the end of its run, but very early on in its run, surpass the entire total of the MCU this year. So you can argue all you want about, well, Shang-Chi, Eternals, those are all new characters, and Black Widow was past its time. And again, those things might be true, but this is still the MCU. Again, this is still the MCU. If these films had done well, everyone would have said, well, of course it did well. It's the MCU. Just like everyone's saying, well, of course this is doing well. It's a Spider-Man movie. Kind of, I guess, forgetting, Amazing Spider-Man 1, Amazing Spider-Man 2, and again, how people actually want to see good movies that are enticing, which this film is delivering on, of which the MCU was not able to deliver on. And yet, what do we also see? Guess what? At this point, net gain already, barely out a week, not even out a full week, already has made $100+ million in net gain, net profit, most of that going to Sony. Whereas the entire MCU still at this point is at, again, for the year, just looking at the MCU by itself, negative $100 million. If you're going to say, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't seem to be fair. What about the fact that Disney's getting a small cut of it? Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm breaking that down as well. But remember, 75% of this money, of these net gains and profits, are going to Sony. So that $20 million or so that it's made so far from the film, not enough to make this up. And let's say it does make up this money. You still have to add in all of the other Disney flops this year. Looking at you, Jungle Cruise. Even going back to the beginning of the pandemic. Again, I'm going to do a breakdown of that at some point. Probably pre-record those for Christmas Day and things like that. Since obviously I know that I and many others will be busy during that time and do, the year on studio versus studio breakdown of the most successful and least successful studios of all time, or rather of this past year, and also doing even also a pandemic breakdown with studios that have been able to kind of withstand that. But the fact still remains that this film is just destroying it. It's destroying everything. Even combined, these films cannot hold a candle to this. And if that doesn't wake you up to the lies, if that doesn't wake you up to what's been going on, at this point, I really don't know what else will. When you look at all of the films that come out this year, right? When you look at every single film, you got $100+ million in net gain profit. You look at West Side Story, expected to lose $100 million. You look at so many of these films to come out, and you realize there really is nothing left for us to be able to look at as a way of excusing it, right? The $60 million loss of Eternals plus. Again, obviously some of these numbers have not been updated like this chart is here, but the point and the fact still remains. This is a juggernaut. This is a narrative breaker. And man, oh man, it's a darn good time to see the media shills try and scramble to explain what's going on, and also the comments coming in so very triggered. And if you're triggered by any of this, by the way, Matrix 4 might be for you, because let's just be honest here, Matrix 4 is meant for the pandering generation that we are now living in. But anyway, what are your thoughts about this? Are you surprised that Spider-Man No Way Home is continuing to have very strong holds? I know a couple people have said, let's wait a little while. Well, hey, we've got a Monday and a Tuesday under our belts, and it's made over $30 million on each of those days, and is expected to continue to do crazy amount of money, especially as we get closer to the Christmas Day, as we get closer to more and more jobs having time off, and schools going out for the Christmas break as well. All of these things going on are going to have an impact, and clearly, as you can see from everything else on this list, no one is really going to see anything else, right? Even Ghostbusters, Resident Evil, all these other things. These are films that are not being seen by other people. Everyone's going to see Spider-Man. It is a movie people actually want to see. It's a movie that it's actually been made. And also, as you can see, even something like Ghostbusters is actually doing a little bit better in this market as well, compared to previous weeks. But that all being said, what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comment section below. Let's like this video, smash that like button, love that fire button on Odyssey. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge shout out to all of my December Patreon Subscribe Star and Locals members. Animation commentator Brandon, Brian P., Christopher Bowman, Dolores Ed, Dion, Father Christopher Miller, Hail to you, Father, Father Damian Cook, Garrett Searles, Hannibal Grimm, Harold Francis, Inflamed Wood, Jacob Juice, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Gomer Kyles 79, Laura, the Modern Major General's Story, Mike Jackson ×4, Mitch Dunaway, Mad Mitch Dunaway, Mr. Peabody, Mondo Spieler, On to June, Orange Chat Reviews, Out of Step with Reality, Priscilla Hall, Rosetta Ullen, Stan Andrian, Teresa Martin, Theodore Bendon, and Tina Bojan, and of course, the Empress of the Universe, Tina B. Thank you very much for being my Patreon members. And for my Subscribe Star members, UAB Mad Dog, Mike Jackson, Storm Tracker, The R, Fast Reaction, Nosferatu Gatsu, Stan 4, John B., Mr. Roy, Glinzer, J. Alex McCarthy Jr., Dean Heiss / the new number 2, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. Thank you very much for supporting me on Subscribestar. And to my 4 members over on Locals.com, Kara Tharp, UAB Mad Dog, once again, Mike Jackson, Bifford a Hobbit, and Robert Barnes. Thank you for supporting me on Locals, and if you want to have your name shouted out at the end of every video and live stream, check out the top link in the video description below. It's called Willow, or w.lo, Willow link. It'll bring you to all of my social media platforms and also to all of the various other locations that you can support the channel. You can get access to things like giveaways, where I do giveaways of 4K films, 4K steelbooks, digital codes, all kinds of stuff every single month. Also, there's a level where you get access to all of that, plus an exclusive podcast that I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, where you also get to ask questions that we will answer on every episode of the podcast. And at the final level, you also have the ability, the Chosen of Valhalla level, you have the ability to have all of that, plus in your first month, get a free t-shirt of your choice, any color, sent anywhere in the world, and also get to be featured once a month on the Chosen of Valhalla live stream featured on the main channel. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, check out the link in the description. You're all amazing and beautiful people. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, God bless.